Meruem is one of, if not the strongest character in Hunter x Hunter shown so far. Even Netero, who, despite being past his prime, was still one of the strongest characters in the series, only managed to inflict a few mere superficial scratches on the Chimera Ant King, even using his strongest attack, Zero Hand. But what if I told you that there are a significant number of characters in the anime who actually have the potential to defeat Meruem? In this video, I'm going to list 6 of those characters who are often overlooked by most fans. And I'll also take the opportunity to debunk some of the characters the fandom insists could beat Meruem, even though there's no concrete evidence for it in the series. And before we get started, make sure to check if you're subscribed to the channel and that your notification bell is on so you don't miss any new Hunter x Hunter videos. Alright, first of all, let's establish the premises of this video so the intent is clear. The characters I'm going to list here wouldn't necessarily defeat Meruem in a casual 1-versus-1 fight. In fact, it's highly likely that most of them would be obliterated by the king in an actual battle. I'd say there are only 2 exceptions, which you'll understand later in the video. But the characters on this list are those who have the potential to defeat the king depending on the circumstances, even if the chance is almost 0. To make this clearer, if we take Hisoka, he's one of the strongest characters shown in the series so far, but he wouldn't stand a chance against Meruem. Absolutely nothing he could do would even scratch the Chimera Ant King, not even if Meruem stood still and let Hisoka hit him as much as he wanted. The characters on this list, however, even though some of them are clearly weaker than Hisoka, would have chances to beat the king thanks to their abilities. As I go through the list and explain, you'll understand. First, Nanaka, the entity inhabiting the body of Aluka, Killua's younger sister. This is the first character that should come to everyone's mind, so I decided to start with her since there's not much to debate in her case. So far, there's no limit to the wishes Nanaka can grant. In other words, to defeat King Meruem, someone could simply wish for Meruem to die, and it would happen without any possibility of countering it. Just like that. It's also important to note that Nanaka is an entity from the Dark Continent, much like the Chimera Ants, who also originated from there. Both are part of the 5 great calamities brought from the Dark Continent. While the danger level of the Chimera Ants was classified as a B, the species Nanaka belongs to was classified as an A, placing her a level above. Second, Finks from the Phantom Troop. Now you might start looking at me strangely, but let me explain why Finks could potentially defeat Meruem. Finks has an enhancement type ability that essentially allows him to charge up a punch by rotating his arm. The more he spins his arm, the stronger the punch becomes. For Finks to have a chance against Meruem, it depends on one factor: whether or not there's a limit to how powerful his punch can get by continuously spinning his arm, and this is something Togashi hasn't clarified yet. If there is a limit based on his aura level, Finks wouldn't stand a chance. However, if there is no limit, then Finks would have a shot at defeating the king. He would just need to keep spinning his arm until his punch became strong enough to disintegrate Meruem. Simple and effective. Now, how long he'd have to keep spinning his arm for that to be possible is unknown. Maybe hours, days, or weeks. But eventually he would reach a point where he could succeed. So, I think it's clear what the video's intention is, right? Finks would definitely be obliterated by Meruem in a fight, but there's still a minuscule chance he could win, even if it's almost 0. Meanwhile, as I mentioned at the start of the video, Hisoka, who is probably stronger than Finks, wouldn't stand a chance at all. His odds would be 0 in a fight, unless he used a bomb like Netero did. Now, I'll mix up the list with characters who don't have much of a foundation but always come to mind due to the hype they have in the series, starting with Ging, Gon's father. Let's kick things off right here. Ging is undoubtedly the most hyped character by the Hunter x Hunter fandom, and I'd say rightly so, considering he's the protagonist's father, and being a shunin, that alone gives him some extra points. Plus, there's the fact that Netero ranked him among the top 5 Nen users. But despite all that, there's absolutely no evidence that Ging could beat Meruem, guys. We've barely seen anything from the character so far. We only saw him replicate Leorio's ability, and that's about it. Let's think about this for a second. Netero, even in his old age, was considered the strongest human alive. And yes, I know that's debatable, as Netero himself said he hadn't been the strongest in quite a while due to his age, but he was still, at the very least, one of the strongest in the Hunter x Hunter universe, at least among those we've seen so far. And this powerhouse barely scratched Meruem, who wasn't even in his strongest form yet. It was a massacre. Meruem absolutely dominated Netero. And remember, Meruem didn't even want to fight. The Chimera King just wanted to have a conversation with him. So, to claim that Ging could beat Meruem, you'd basically be suggesting there's an enormous gap in power between Ging and old Netero. And to me, that's insane. We need to wait for Ging to show his full power before we can even begin to debate whether he could stand a chance. Third, Camilla, the second prince of Kaken. Here we have a character that only appears in the manga. She's the second prince of Kaken and is involved in the Succession War arc, with a nen ability that could probably defeat Meruem. She's one of the exceptions I mentioned earlier in the video, someone who would actually beat Meruem in a fight, and quite easily, since all she would need to do is literally die. That's because Camilla's nen ability is a counterattack type, which activates after she's killed. Basically, upon her death, a nen beast appears and absorbs the life of the person who killed her, using that absorbed life energy to revive her. Chapter 373. So far, those are the only details we have about her ability. There might be some limitations to it, because if there aren't, Camilla would essentially be immortal, only able to die from natural causes. Based on the current information, Camilla would definitely defeat Meruem in a fight. As soon as the king kills her, the nen beast would appear, absorb Meruem's vitality, and result in his death. It's likely that her nen beast works similarly to Knuckles' pot clean, which relentlessly tracks the opponent and can't be destroyed or countered. It's also important to consider Meruem's personality before and after the bomb in this scenario. Before the bomb, he would kill any human without hesitation, meaning Camilla would be killed as soon as she spoke. On the other hand, if it were post-bomb Meruem, it would be almost impossible for Camilla to kill him, since he returned with a more peaceful and compassionate outlook, not wanting to kill anyone anymore. Periston, the rat zodiac. If we're talking about Ging, we have to mention his main antagonist in the manga, Periston. He's another character who gets a lot of hype from the fandom, and I think rightly so. Togashi seems to be setting him up as one of the main antagonists of the series moving forward, especially as a rival to Ging. However, just like with Ging, there's absolutely no evidence that Periston could defeat Meruem. In his case, unlike Ging, we haven't even seen him use nen yet, so there's nothing to base any claims on. Fourth Knov, he is one of the hunters selected by Netero for the mission against the Chimera ants. He's an emitter with a pretty broken and useful ability. His power isn't simple and has some variations, but for this video, we only care about one aspect of it. His ability called Scream. This allows Knov to envelop an opponent with a portal shaped by his hands, teleporting only part of the enemy's body and closing the portal. This leaves part of the body in the real world and sends the other part into another dimension created by his Hatsu. He even uses this technique to decapitate a Chimera ant. Since this is a teleportation ability, in theory, he could do the same to Meruem, slicing him in half. This situation is similar to the question of whether Doctor Strange could have used his portals to cut Thanos in half. There's no specific information on whether this ability has limitations, like the enemy's high durability or resistance preventing Knov from splitting them in two. So yes, it's likely that Knov could pull this off against Meruem. It's no coincidence Togashi removed him during the palace invasion phase, but just because he could theoretically do this doesn't mean he could in practice without a solid plan or some assistance, considering Meruem's well-known speed. However, since Meruem doesn't know Knov's abilities, there's hope he could succeed. Beyond Netero and Maha Ziggy Zoldyck. These two are included for the same reason. There's no evidence in the series that either could defeat Meruem. Beyond is hyped simply because he's Netero's son. I genuinely believe he's a monster, but that's all we know about him. As for Maha, whom we briefly see in the York Shin arc, and who has a strong chance of being the same person as Ziggy, who went to the Dark Continent with Netero in the past, making him Zeno's grandfather. There's no solid proof that he could beat the king either, but honestly, he's the one I'd bet on the most, based solely on the hype that Zeno gives him. Zeno praises Netero, who was probably in his prime, just for surviving a fight with his grandfather. Netero's feat here wasn't about being equal to Zeno's grandfather, but about making it out alive from a battle against him, which is insane. But we don't even know if Prime Netero could truly defeat Meruem. We'd need to see just how powerful he was first. Fifth, Adult Gon. A fight between Adult Gon and Meruem is widely debated among the fandom, and I get the sense that most people think Meruem would still win, but there's a portion that believes Gon could take the victory. Even if you think Meruem would come out on top, it's undeniable that Adult Gon would have a chance to win, considering the sheer power of his attacks. Gon, with simple punches, was able to obliterate Pito like she was nothing, without even using Jajanken. When he did use Jajanken, it caused a massive explosion around them and likely disintegrated what remained of Pito. This shows that Adult Gon, unlike old Netero, who only managed to land superficial scratches on Meruem, would at least be able to deal real damage with his attacks, and I'm not talking about minor damage here, but serious, significant damage, especially with Jajanken. After all, what better way to counter high durability and resistance than the peak of enhancement nen usage that we saw in the series? It's worth noting that Togashi classified this Gon as supreme level in his use of enhancement nen. We should also remember Pito's famous remark, when Gon, still in his teenage form, form, sat down with that intense look to wait for Komugi's recovery, Pito already claimed that Gon could pose a threat to the king himself. She reaffirms this the moment Gon transforms, saying again that his claws could truly reach the king. Of course, this doesn't mean Gon's victory was guaranteed, especially given his unstable mental state, but in his adult form, Gon was definitely a potential danger even to Meruem. So, who would win in a fight between them is still up for debate, but it's undeniable that adult Gon would at least have a chance to win. Krallo Lucifer, leader of the Phantom Troop. This is another character that many people love to claim could defeat Meruem, and honestly, he does have potential. Togashi could simply create a new ability for him that would be capable of defeating Meruem and say it was something Krallo stole from someone else, like a manipulation ability, for example. However, we need to consider what he has shown so far, which wouldn't be enough to take down the king. Maybe later on, he'll reveal an ability that could be effective. Rihan. This is a character from the Succession arc, who only appears in the manga, serving as one of the personal soldiers of the first Prince Benjamin. His Hatsu is quite interesting and could be effective against Meruem. The ability is called Predator, shown in chapters 374 and 381, where he can summon a Nen beast targeting an opponent to become its natural predator. However, for this to work, Rihan first needs to gather as much information as possible about that target's abilities. The more precise his analysis and understanding of the target's capabilities, the stronger that predator becomes, to the point where the Nen beast becomes the target's natural predator and can defeat it. It's uncertain how much information Rihan would need to defeat Meruem and how much he would have to expose himself to gather such information about him, especially if he can't obtain information about Meruem through others. But at least in theory, he would have that capability. As I explained, the Nen beast figuratively becomes the natural predator of that target, so it can be said that he could use it against Meruem. 7. A character with manipulation type Nen. Although abilities from other categories may seem more interesting, it's clear that manipulation is the most dangerous. A character who is a manipulator and possesses an ability aimed at controlling living beings under certain conditions could, in theory, defeat Meruem. Of course, not all manipulators fit this bill. For example, Illumi and Shalnark wouldn't apply here since their Hatsu activates by inserting needles into their targets, which would be impossible against Meruem unless they have other variations with different conditions. But Poof, for instance, has an ability that uses a kind of pollen released from his wings, which can manipulate his enemies. So, nothing would stop him from using something like that on Meruem and successfully manipulating him. If a manipulator whose conditions could be applied to Meruem directed their ability at the Chimera Ant King and commanded him to kill himself, the king would indeed do so, and the character would win. Remember that Meruem easily tore off his own arm during the arc, so what's stopping him from thrusting his hand into his own chest and pulling out his heart, for example? In other words, some manipulators could indeed defeat the king. Thought of another character not on this list who has an ability capable of defeating Meruem? Leave it in the comments. And now check out my latest video about Adult Gon versus Meruem. It's popping up on the screen now, or you can go straight to the channel's playlist to binge all the videos.